The last thing Nolan Dempsey expected on a rainy Tuesday morning was a woman standing barefoot in the middle of the laundromat, soaked from head to toe and laughing like she'd lost her mind. He blinked, his 6-year-old son Zion tugging on his hoodie as they walked in. "Dad, why is that lady dripping on the floor?" "I have no idea," Nolan muttered, adjusting the laundry basket in his arms. The woman, tall, chestnut hair plastered to her face, wearing what used to be a very expensive-looking cream blouse, was spinning slowly in front of the broken dryer like she was in a music video. Except the floor was linoleum, and the whole place smelled like detergent and wet socks. She finally noticed him watching, straightened, and grinned. "Hi." Nolan set the basket down slowly. "You okay?" "Better now," she said, brushing wet bangs out of her eyes. "I slipped on the curb outside, fell into the street. Rain got me. The dryer here ate my last $5 and won't start." Zion looked up at his dad with wide eyes. "She's a mess." "Zion," Nolan warned, but the woman laughed again. "No, he's right," she said, her smile lighting up her whole face. "I'm a complete disaster." Nolan rubbed the back of his neck. "Hang on." He walked to the back, grabbed one of the old towels he kept in his duffel for emergencies, and handed it to her. She took it gratefully. "You're a lifesaver." "Name's Nolan. That's my kid, Zion." "Willow," she said, clutching the towel around her shoulders. "Nice to meet you both." "You got a ride coming?" Nolan asked, glancing out at the downpour. "Nope, and my phone's dead. Was walking. Bad idea, I know." He hesitated. "You can sit by the heater. This place gets warm fast once the dryers kick in." She looked at him, surprised. "I don't want to intrude." "You're already dripping on the floor. Might as well stay warm." Zion giggled. "She's funny. Can she stay, Dad?" Willow gave a mock curtsy. "I'd be honored." Nolan loaded their clothes into the machine and set it. Willow sat quietly on a plastic chair, steam curling from her damp clothes as she held the towel tight. Her eyes wandered around the room, landing on the worn sneakers on Nolan's feet, the faded patches on his jeans, and the way he knelt to tie Zion's shoes without thinking twice. "You come here often?" she asked. "Every Tuesday and Friday," Nolan said, standing up. "No washer at home." "You live nearby?" 2 blocks down, small apartment, just me and the kid." She looked at Zion with a soft smile. "He's sweet." "He's trouble," Nolan said, ruffling his son's curls. "But he's mine." Willow's smile faltered for a second, something flickering in her expression. She leaned back in her chair. "You always this nice to random soaked women." He chuckled. "Only the ones who look like they've fought a hurricane and lost." The dryer buzzed. Nolan tossed his hoodie at Zion. "Go fold the towels, bud." Willow stood still damp. "I'll get going." "Hold up," Nolan said. "Your clothes are half drenched. You'll freeze out there." She opened her mouth to object, but he was already pulling out one of his clean shirts from the basket. "Here, it's big, but it's dry." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." Willow accepted it, touched. "Thank you." "There's a bathroom in the back. You can change." When she returned, swimming in his navy shirt and her wet pants rolled at the cuffs, Nolan did a double take. She looked beautiful, but not in the typical way, more like real, present. And despite the fact that she was wearing his oversized shirt and had no makeup on, she looked like she belonged in that moment. "Better?" he asked. Willow nodded. "Much." They sat in silence for a few minutes while Zion folded towels with the concentration of a NASA scientist. Willow tilted her head at Nolan. "You always been a single dad." He hesitated. Zion's mom left when he was 2, not her thing. Willow's expression turned serious. "That must have been hard." "The first year was hell," he admitted. "But now, I can't imagine it any other way. She looked at him differently then, not with pity but with admiration. And you, he asked, what do you do? Willow paused. I work in consulting, freelance stuff. He nodded. That why you were walking in the rain? I needed air, she said quickly. Been cooped up too long. The rain finally started to ease. The laundromat felt warmer now, the metallic hum of dryers filling the space. Willow glanced at her reflection in the dryer door and laughed softly. I must look ridiculous. You don't, Nolan said before he could stop himself. Their eyes met. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wasn't expecting the honesty. Then Zion broke the moment. Dad, can we get pizza? Nolan glanced at the time. His stomach growled in agreement. Willow stood, adjusting the towel draped around her shoulders. Should head out. You sure? Nolan asked. We're just grabbing a slice around the corner. She hesitated. It's not fancy, he added, but Zion says the owner puts magic in the crust. Zion nodded solemnly. True story. Willow laughed, a real one this time. All right, one slice. They walked out into the cool air, Nolan holding the umbrella over her head without thinking. She noticed. Of course she did. As they walked down the street, Willow glanced sideways at him. You don't know anything about me. He shrugged. You were kind to my kid, that's enough. She smiled, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. And for the first time in a long time, Nolan felt something twist deep in his chest. Like maybe, just maybe, the storm had blown something good his way for once. He just didn't know yet. The woman wearing his shirt, walking beside him in the drizzle, was a millionaire. And she was about to change his entire world. Willow stirred her tea slowly with the wooden stirrer, watching the steam rise in lazy curls, while Nolan sat across from her in the corner booth of Tony's Pizza. Zion was at the arcade machine in the back, his face lit up by the flashing screen, a slice of cheese pizza forgotten on his plate. Thanks again, Willow said, her voice quieter now, more careful. This wasn't how I pictured my day unfolding. Nolan leaned back, the red vinyl of the booth creaking under him. Can't say it was on my schedule either, but life's good at throwing curveballs. Willow looked around the pizzeria walls covered in faded photos of little league teams, the scent of garlic and tomato sauce thick in the air. It's nice here. Feels like people actually live in this neighborhood. They do, Nolan said. Sometimes too loudly, sometimes too close, but yeah, it's real. She traced a finger along the rim of her cup. I don't get out much anymore. Not like this. What do you mean? Nolan asked, watching her expression shift. I spend most of my time in boardrooms or behind a laptop. Meetings, negotiations, contracts, days blur together. This, she motioned to the cracked linoleum floor and the buzzing soda machine, this feels like another planet. He studied her, that a good thing. Willow hesitated. Sometimes forget what normal feels like. Nolan nodded slowly. That's the thing about normal, you don't miss it until it's gone. Zion's triumphant shout broke the moment. He ran back to the table, breathless. Dad, I beat the high score. Nolan gave him a low 5. That's my boy. Willow smiled, watching them. He's got your determination. He's stubborn as a mule, Nolan said, ruffling Zion's curls. But yeah, he doesn't give up easy. Zion tugged on his sleeve. Can I go again? Last round, Nolan said, then homework. Zion groaned, but ran off again. Homework? Willow asked, raising a brow. Second grade stuff. He's got this reading challenge. Needs to finish by Friday. She tilted her head. You help him with it. Every night, Nolan said. We take turns reading chapters. He likes the ones with dragons. Willow's eyes softened. You're doing a good job. He gave a half shrug, trying. A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, just thick with things unsaid. Finally, Willow leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you ever wish things had turned out differently? Nolan's jaw tensed slightly. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Yeah, some nights I think about what could have been easier, but if that meant not having Zion, no, I take this life over anything else. Willow watched him carefully, her fingers tightening around the cup. That kind of clarity, it's rare. I didn't get it overnight, he said. Took a lot of screw-ups and second chances. She nodded, then looked out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks glistening under the amber glow of the streetlights. Do you live alone? Nolan asked suddenly. Willow blinked. Technically, yes, but there's always someone around. Assistants, drivers, people who need things from me. He raised an eyebrow. Drivers. She paused. I mean, co-workers, project partners. I manage a lot of logistics. You don't strike me as the corporate type. That's because I'm not wearing heels and a blazer, she said with a small laugh. You'd be surprised who have to pretend to be 9 hours a day. Sounds exhausting. More than you know. Zion returned, breathless again, and slid into the booth beside Willow this time. She handed him a napkin without thinking, and he wiped his hands before grabbing his pizza. You like dragons? She asked him. Love them, Zion said with a mouthful. Dad does the voices when we read. Willow turned to Nolan. You do voices. I'm a man of many talents, he said deadpan. She laughed, and even Zion chuckled. The bell above the door jingled as a group of teenagers came in, loud and laughing, filling the place with noise. Nolan glanced at the clock. We should head back, he said, standing up. Gotta get this one cleaned up and ready for tomorrow. Willow stood slowly. Thank you for everything. Nolan hesitated, then pulled out the pen from his pocket and scribbled something on a napkin. If you ever need a dry shirt again, or pizza. Willow took the napkin, eyes scanning the number. You sure? He shrugged. Can't promise dragons, but I can promise real. She folded the napkin and tucked it into her coat. Sometimes real is exactly what I need. They stepped out into the night. The air was cool, the city quieter now. Nolan pulled Zion's hoodie up over his head, then looked at Willow. You need a ride. She shook her head. I'll call someone. He nodded once. Take care, Willow. As he turned to walk away, Zion looked back at her. You gonna call my dad? Willow smiled, crouched to his level, and whispered, I think it will. She watched them disappear around the corner, Nolan's hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. Only when they were gone did she pull out her phone, a sleek silver device tucked into the inside pocket of her coat, and power it on. It lit up instantly, dozens of missed calls and messages flooding the screen. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her contacts, scrolled past finance managers, media strategists, and board members, and typed in a new name. Nolan Dempsey. Then she looked up at the sky clear now, stars faint but visible, and smiled. Something had shifted. And for the first time in years, she let herself hope it might stay. Dad, she's here. Nolan looked up from the battered toolbox he'd been sorting on the kitchen floor. Zion stood at the front window, nose nearly pressed to the glass, his voice tinged with excitement. He wiped his hands on a rag and crossed the room. Outside, a black SUV waited at the curb. The back door opened, and Willow stepped out, dressed simply in a navy sweater and jeans, but looking like she belonged in a magazine ad anyway. She waved toward the window, her expression cautiously bright. She really came, Zion whispered. Nolan rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Go finish your chapter like we agreed. I'll tell her to come up. The kid groaned but obeyed, trudging to the worn-out couch where his book lay open. Nolan headed down the narrow stairs of the building, the air in the stairwell thick with the scent of old paint and someone's overcooked dinner. Willow waited at the bottom, one hand tucked in her coat pocket, the other holding a paper bag. "Hey," she said with a tentative smile, "I brought muffins." He raised a brow. "Muffins?" "Bribery," she admitted. "I didn't want to show up empty-handed." Nolan took the bag, surprised by the warmth of it. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, "but I wanted to." He held the door open for her, and they climbed the stairs together. At the top, Nolan paused. "It's not much," he said, "but it's home." Willow stepped inside and looked around. The apartment was small, 2 rooms and a galley kitchen, but tidy. A few toys were scattered in a basket by the couch, and drawings were taped crookedly along the hallway wall. The scent of lemon cleaner lingered faintly in the air. "It's perfect," she said. Zion looked up from the couch and grinned. "Did you bring dragons?" "No dragons," she answered, crossing to the kitchen table and setting the bag down. "But I brought blueberry and double chocolate. That's almost as good." He nodded solemnly. "That'll do." Willow sat while Nolan poured coffee into mismatched mugs. He handed her one and leaned against the counter. She took a sip, then looked around the room again. "You fixed the door," she said. Nolan glanced at it. "Yeah, the latch was sticking last week. Had to realign the frame." "You do your own repairs?" "Most of the time. Can't afford to call anyone unless it's urgent." She nodded, thoughtful. "My shower head's been dripping for 2 weeks. I've been meaning to call someone, but keep forgetting." "Bring it here," he said. "I'll fix it." She smiled into her mug. "I might take you up on that." Zion wandered into the kitchen, holding his book. "Can she read the next chapter with us?" Willow looked at Nolan. "If that's okay." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, grab the book, bud." They settled on the couch, Zion between them, his small fingers gripping the pages. Willow took the book and began to read, her voice low and expressive. Nolan watched her, not the words. The way she leaned in, the way she paused for dramatic effect, it wasn't just polite. She was present, fully in it. When she finished the chapter, Zion clapped. "You're good at that." She gave him a mock bow. "Thank you, kind sir." "I'm gonna draw the dragon from the story," he announced, hopping up and running for his crayons. Willow turned to Nolan. "You two have something special." "I know," he said quietly. She glanced toward the hallway. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." They stood in silence for a moment before Willow reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, holding it out. Nolan took it, confused. Inside was a folded invitation, thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. He read it twice before speaking. "This is for a gala." "Yes." "A charity event." "Yes." He looked at her. "Why are you inviting me to something like this?" "I'm on the board," she said. "It's for youth programs, things like tutoring, after-school support. It's important to me." He frowned. "I don't have a suit. I don't belong in places like that." Willow stepped closer. "You belong wherever I say you do." He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like boss talk." "I've been called worse." He handed back the card. "I appreciate it, but—" "Don't answer now," she said quickly. "Just think about it, no pressure. I just thought, maybe you'd like to see my world for a night." "And if I don't fit into it?" "I don't fit into it either," she said softly. "Not really." He studied her for a long moment. "You're not like anyone I've met." "And you're not like anyone I usually deal with," she replied. "That's why I keep showing up." Zion came running back in, holding up a drawing of a red dragon with lopsided wings. Look, he breathes fire and eats clouds. Willow crouched beside him. That's incredible. What's his name? Flamebelly. She gasped, obviously. Nolan laughed, the sound catching even him off guard. When she stood again, her eyes caught his. If you decide to come, let me know. I'll handle everything. He nodded slowly, unsure. Willow glanced at the clock. Should go. Zion protested, but she promised she'd visit again. As she walked to the door, Nolan followed her into the hallway. Thanks for reading with him, he said. Thanks for letting me. Outside, the SUV waited again, but this time she hesitated at the door. I meant what I said, she murmured. You'd be doing me a favor by coming. Then she stepped into the car and was gone. Nolan stood there for a while, envelope in hand, wondering what the hell he was getting himself into. He looked through the window at the stars starting to push through the dusk. He didn't have a suit. But suddenly, that felt like the smallest problem in the world. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime, revealing a ballroom awash in amber light and glimmering glass. Willow stepped out first in a slate blue silk gown, her hair pinned into a low twist at her nape, diamonds catching the light at her ears. Nolan followed behind in the charcoal suit she'd tailored for him, though he didn't know that, until she casually handed it over the night before with a shrug and a single sentence. I figured your shoulders would make the measurements tricky. He'd nearly refused. Now, standing just inside the grand hall, it took everything not to tug at the collar. Willow turned to him, her hand extended. You ready? I've never been more out of place in my life. You're not out of place, she said, threading her fingers through his. You're with me. At the far end of the room, a man in a white tuxedo caught sight of Willow and started toward them. Nolan instinctively straightened. Willow didn't flinch. Willow, the man said smoothly, you're late. You're early, Julian, she replied, her tone light but edged. Julian's eyes flicked to Nolan, and this is. My guest, she said simply, Nolan Dempsey. Julian offered a tight smile. Charmed, I'd heard you were bringing someone, unexpected. Nolan met his gaze evenly. Likewise. Willow's fingers tightened briefly in Nolan's. Let's not do this here. Julian gave a shallow nod and retreated into the crowd. Nolan leaned in. Should I know who that is? Julian Vance. He's the reason, resigned from the Foundation's executive board last year. You resigned. I didn't like where the money was going. He did. We disagreed, loudly. Nolan looked around at the polished crowd, the champagne flutes, the string quartet playing near the balcony. You used to be part of this world. She met his eyes. I built this world, then I realized didn't want to live in it. Before he could answer, a woman in a feathered gown stepped up and pulled Willow aside for a conversation about auction logistics. Nolan was left to navigate the sea of tuxedos and chatter on his own. He moved toward the back wall, where servers were replenishing trays of hors d'oeuvres. A young woman in a navy dress stood beside him, sipping something pale and sparkling. You're here with Willow, aren't you? She asked, turning toward him. I am. You're brave. This crowd eats newcomers alive. I'll survive. She smiled. I'm her cousin, Celia. We grew up together. I used to sneak her out of piano lessons and into comic book stores. She never mentioned that. She doesn't talk much about the past, especially not the part where she had to grow up twice as fast as the rest of us. Nolan looked toward Willow, who was now laughing politely at something an older donor was saying. She's different from everyone here. She always was. Celia tilted her glass. She just forgot for a few years. Willow returned to his side before he could respond. Sorry, I got cornered. Your cousin seems nice. Celia, she's one of the few I still trust. They found their seats just as the speeches began. Nolan listened as names were read, donations announced, and applause rolled through the room like clockwork. Willow stayed composed, gracious, but Nolan could feel the way her fingers curled under the table, just out of sight. I hate this part, she murmured. Then why come back? She looked at him, eyes steady. Because if I don't show up, people like Julian get to pat themselves on the back while cutting support for kids who need it most. Later, during the auction, she leaned toward him. You see that painting up there, the one with the river and the crooked tree? He nodded. I used to sit by a tree just like that when I first moved to the city. It was the only place that felt quiet. I'd bring coffee and sit there for hours. No one knew who I was. No one asked me for anything. You miss being invisible. I miss being seen for the right reasons. When the painting came up for bid, Nolan watched her closely. She didn't raise a hand, she didn't even blink, but something in her posture shifted. As the final bid was called $50,000, he stood up, ignoring the surprised stares. Willow's hand grabbed his. What are you doing? Something ridiculous, he whispered. He crossed the room, walked straight to the auctioneer, and leaned in to speak quietly. A few moments later, the man tapped the microphone. Correction, we have a late bid, $60,000. Gasps rippled through the room, eyes turned. Nolan returned to his seat, face unreadable. Willow stared at him. You don't have $60,000. I don't, he said. Then what did you just do? I told them the buyer wants to donate it anonymously, and that the painting should be delivered to the youth center on 24th Street. You said you wanted it to go to kids, right? Her mouth parted, stunned. Why? Because that tree mattered to you, and maybe it'll matter to them too. She reached for his hand under the table, her fingers shaking. You didn't have to do that. I know. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She was pulled in every direction, photos, conversations, updates, but her eyes always found him. And when it was finally over, when the ballroom began to empty and the servers collected half-finished glasses, she grabbed his hand and pulled him out onto the balcony. The city stretched out around them, lights glittering in every direction. I spent the last 5 years thinking I built a life, she said quietly, leaning on the railing. But it wasn't one I wanted to live. You can still change it. She turned, eyes shining. Already did. The day I walked into that laundromat and met a man who offered me a towel and didn't ask who I was. I didn't need to know, he said. I just saw someone who needed help. Willow stepped closer, and I saw someone who didn't treat me like a title or a bank account, just a person. Nolan hesitated. You sure someone like me fits in your world? She took his hand, pressed it against her heart. This is the only world I want. He kissed her then, under the glow of the city skyline, slow, sure, and without hesitation. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, she laughed softly, breath-catching. What? He asked. I was just thinking, she said. That night in the laundromat, I thought I'd lost everything. But turns out, I found the only thing I was missing. Nolan smiled, the city reflected in his eyes. You sure you're ready for a life with dragons, pizza nights, and a kid who refuses to wear socks? She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. I've never been more ready. And somewhere, miles away in a quiet youth center, where a painting would soon hang on the wall, a crooked tree waited to become someone else's quiet place, proof that even the smallest choices can change everything. Rain tapped against the windows of Willow's penthouse as she stood by the balcony doors, barefoot, her satin robe tied loosely around her waist. The early morning sky was still painted in deep blue, the city lights below fading into the dawn. Behind her, the faint clatter of breakfast being made in her kitchen felt foreign in the best way. Nolan was humming. She turned slowly, watching him move around her pristine, rarely used kitchen like he belonged there. He was barefoot too, sleeves rolled up, flipping something on the stove while Zion sat at the marble counter, still in pajamas, building a fortress out of toast crusts. "I can't believe this kitchen actually works," Nolan said over his shoulder. Willow crossed the room and leaned against the counter. "It's been used more in the last 2 weeks than it has in the last 2 years. Zion popped a piece of fruit into his mouth. "Dad says it's too clean. He likes kitchens with crumbs." Willow raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "I'm adaptable," Nolan said, offering her a plate. "But you might need to get used to a few cracker trails." Willow accepted the food and perched on the stool across from them. "I think I can handle that." The quiet between them was the kind that had settled in naturally since Nolan and Zion began spending nights here comfortable, warm, like a rhythm found without trying. Willow hadn't planned it. It had just happened. One night became 3. 3 became a week. And now, Nolan's hoodie hung beside her tailored coats, and Zion's dragon drawings were pinned to a stainless steel refrigerator that used to be bare. "Hey," Nolan said, watching her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I've just never had a morning like this, not in this place." Zion looked up. "Can we go to the park later?" Willow smiled. "Absolutely. I'll bring the snacks, you bring the dragons." He grinned, clearly satisfied. Later that day, the 3 of them strolled through the park, Zion darting ahead with a toy sword tucked into his belt, pretending every tree was a villain. Nolan and Willow walked side by side along the path strewn with fallen petals and sunlight. "I got a call yesterday," Willow said, her fingers brushing his, "from the youth center." "Everything all right?" They received the painting, hung it in the art room already. The kids apparently fought over who got to draw the tree first. Nolan exhaled. "That's good." They also asked if I'd consider joining their advisory board, not for fundraising, to help with program development. He turned to her. "You thinking about it?" "I already said yes." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nolan said, "Feels like you're building something new." "I am," she said softly, "and I want you in it." He nodded, then paused. "There's something I've been meaning to ask." Willow tilted her head. "Should I be nervous?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, square envelope. "I know this isn't traditional, and I definitely didn't plan it like some grand gesture, but I had this made a while ago." She took the envelope, curious, and opened it. Inside was a simple card. On it, in handwriting that was clearly Zion's, were the words, "Can we keep her?" Willow laughed, a tear catching at the corner of her eye. "You got your son to propose for you." Nolan pulled out a second card. This one was his own. He handled the emotional pitch. "Figured I'd cover logistics." She read it aloud. "Move in with us. Permanently. No gala gowns required, just you and maybe your blueberry muffins." Her voice caught. "Nolan." He stepped closer. "We don't need a ring yet, we don't need to rush, but I want this, a real life with you." Willow looked up, eyes glassy. "You already have me." He kissed her, right there in the middle of the path, while Zion pretended to slay an imaginary beast nearby. By the time they got home that evening, Willow had already cleared out half her closet for Nolan. Zion's books were stacked beside hers on the nightstand. The apartment, once a place she used only to sleep and host obligatory meetings, now echoed with laughter and leftover spaghetti and the occasional roar of a tiny dragon warrior. Weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost too natural to be new. Willow began spending afternoons at the youth center, helping launch a creative mentorship program. Nolan was offered a part-time position there as well, teaching basic carpentry and maintenance skills. He took it, despite claiming he wasn't much of a teacher. "You're more than that," Willow told him one night as they lay on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. "You're a builder. You fix more than doors." Zion, now a proud owner of a massive cardboard dragon fortress, declared their living room a no-suit zone. Willow happily obliged, trading her heels for fuzzy socks and her board meetings for story hours. One evening, as a thunderstorm rolled in and the city lights blinked against the clouds, Nolan pulled Willow onto the balcony. Rain had just started to fall, light and warm. "You danced in the rain once," he said, "in a laundromat." "I was having a breakdown." "You were having a breakthrough," he corrected, tugging her close. "You just didn't know it yet." She looked up at him, the rain catching in her lashes. "What do you see now?" "I see the woman I want to spend my life with." She kissed him without hesitation, and when they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "No more running?" he asked. "No more pretending," she said. "This is real, and it's ours." They stood there as the rain fell around them, the city humming below, their world no longer divided by status or circumstance, but woven together by something far rarer: truth, trust, and a love that had risen from the most unexpected place. A year later, in a quiet garden surrounded by close friends, children from the youth center, and one very proud boy holding a ring pillow shaped like a dragon egg, Willow and Nolan said their vows beneath a canopy of lights. Zion insisted on reading a passage from his favorite book, and when he finished, he looked up and declared, "They're my forever family now." Everyone laughed, and no one disagreed. Willow wore a simple dress. Nolan wore the same suit from the gala, and between them, no diamonds sparkled brighter than the joy in their eyes. They didn't need a castle or a crown. They had something better. Home, heart, and every morning after, together,